What is the creepiest experience you've ever had while driving late at night very early in the morning? Not me but my brother. Driving home from out of town with wife and 3 kids in the back. Going 100 down the highway, both him and his wife see a man on the side of the road. He wasn't trying to hitchhike and wasn't really paying attention to the cars. They only saw him for a second, but he kinda looked like he was stumbling. They're at least 5k from the last town, so they figure he's in trouble. They want to turn around to see if he's okay, but on the highway you can't just do that anywhere. By the time they find a turn off and make it back to the spot, it's at least 15 minutes later. They don't see anything, so they call the local police and explain the situation. My brother and the officer look around a bit, but there's not much you can do. This is the middle of the prairies. There's lots of open land and they're not 100% sure exactly where they saw the guy. The officer says he'll call some more guys and look around a bit more, but for my brother to go home and get his kids to bed. The next morning he got a call from the officer. They found the guy in a diabetic coma and were able to get him to a hospital. He had some beers at the town they passed and just wandered off. My brother definitely saved his life. If this was near Wadena, Saskatchewan, that was me. I did this exact thing in my early 20s. Got drunk, type 2 diabetic, shouldn't be drinking, and wandered away from a party. Cops found me in a ditch freezing to death. Not nearly as bad as some, but last year I drove through West Virginia frequently, usually entirely on I-64, which takes you through some relatively desolate parts of the Appalachians, fairly often under a blanket of fog. On one occasion it was about 3:30 on the morning and Waze alerted me of a crash up ahead that completely closed off I-64. So I got off and was redirected for 2 hours through what seemed to be an endless succession of postage stamp sized towns and obscure country roads. I was tired and the whole thing was pretty spooky. At some point I switched to one of those AM radio fire and brimstone "the world is about to end" preachers that was broadcasting somewhere nearby, and for whatever reason I couldn't turn it off. Listening to that while driving through that part of the country at 4 AM under a blanket of fog felt like a scene from a horror novel and really stands out in my memory. How whenever I drive through on a Sunday, that's like all you can find in the radio. So creepy. Not creepy really, more funny weird. At night driving westbound across the I-90 bridge to Seattle. In the headlights I saw a man in the road just barely off the shoulder, on the wrong side of the pedestrian barrier, walking opposite to the traffic. He was very tall with long white hair, a long white beard, a billowing white robe, and I swear to God, a long wooden staff. He was striding with some dang purpose, but obviously out of place and at great risk. So I called 911, and when they asked for a description all I could think was to tell them to look for Gandalf the White Wizard. Later the dispatcher called me back to tell me he sent out a bolo for Gandalf and the responding officer reported my description was perfect. Wasn't absurdly late at night, but I saw a man in a thick yellow raincoat with a hood up slowly walking down a dark street with an axe handle in his hands. It was summer and still like 84 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was not raining nor was there threat of rain. His walk was slow, deliberate, and creepy. Probably just a M-head, but I was glad I was in a car. He knows what you did last summer. Was driving through Arizona a night and a black Yukon with police lights tailgated us. My wife said to not pull over as it doesn't look like a police car. It followed us for 4 minutes then pulled away. I almost fell for it. This is such a scary thing to have happen. Really glad for your wife's judgment. That could have ended badly otherwise. Back when there was that clown phase, I was driving to school early in the morning and pull up to a stop sign and look over and just see a freaking clown. Dang near crap myself. Frick that guy. 2016. What a weird year. An owl hit the side of my car while I was driving on a state highway. Left a big dust mark on the side of the car. Freaked me and my then girlfriend out pretty badly. We pulled over and then drove back to see if it was dead by the side of the road. It wasn't. Those suckers are surprisingly resilient. I saw a car that was pulled over. The passenger side door was open. A man was beating his partner. Called 911. Gave the vehicle description and a partial plate. I'm still scared I made the abuse worse. If they were at the point that they'd beat their partner on the side of the road, your actions could do nothing but help. You should be proud. For all you know, you've saved them. You did the right thing. and I am proud for you in that regard. When I was 18/19, my best friend, her sister, and I were driving home late after a night out. It was raining hard and made it extremely difficult to see on the highway. We stopped under an overpass to see if the weather would lighten up a bit. I turned to look out the window, front seat passenger, to find someone in a hoodie charging at the vehicle. Immediately go. We sped off into the night and made it home safely. I have never stopped under an overpass again and I am almost 40. Someone who lived under the overpass. So the summer after I graduated I worked at a state park as a temporary worker. My shift was 8 PM to 4 AM with one of the rangers. One night, we were driving down to one of the boat launches when a man jumps out of the bush right in front of us. He was dressed only in his tighty whities, waving a stick like a sword at the truck. The ranger opened the door and leaned out, asking, "Sir, do you need some help?" To which he screamed, "No," and ran into the woods again. Saw a lot of weird crap at that job. I mean, the man knew what he was doing. Haha. Driving back from visiting my boyfriend at his college. The drive took about 3 hours by expressway in rural area. It was late and very dark out. All of a sudden the wheels starts shaking really bad and I have to pull over. Luckily there was a rest stop exit right there and I was able to pull off the expressway. My friend was with me and she is pretty drunk and no help. I get out to see what happened and see my tire is very low. Please note this was years ago. Cell phones were a thing, but good service wasn't. I opened the trunk to get out the jack and spare tire. 2 guys come over to help. Mind you, it is the middle of the night at a rural rest stop, so I'm a little cautious but can use the help. I can and have changed a tire, but it's not easy and takes me longer than I care to admit. So I'll let the guys help, but it quickly became apparent they have no idea what they are doing. As I'm trying to get rid of these 2, my buzzed friend gets out of the car and starts trying to chat them up. Ugh. It takes her a couple tries, but I get her back in the car all while trying to get these guys to leave. I'm starting to get really uncomfortable and nervous when out of the corner of my eye I see a car pull out from a dark corner of the parking lot. 2 other guys pull up and before they even got out of the car the first 2 hurried to their car and left. The new guys quickly changed my tire. None of us said a word while they changed it. I said thank you and both gave me a nod and just left. No clue who those fellows were, how long they sat in the shadows watching, but after 20 plus years I think of them often and wish them well. I think they were your rescue team. Not necessarily creepy, but messed up either way. I was about 19, driving my mom's car through the woods late at night to go take care of my friend's cats that I was cat sitting. Keep in mind I do have pretty bad driving anxiety. As I'm driving through the woods, someone throws an egg at the car and it hit straight at the windshield. It was dark outside and I couldn't see, and the egg basically covered my entire field of vision. I turned the windshield wipers on and just tried to get to where I was going since there was nowhere to pull over. I never saw who did it, and the noise from it hitting the windshield was so loud I thought someone shot me the car for a second. Took a while for my heart rate to go down after that one. Since you're in the woods, it's possible that an eagle or bird was getting rid of a bad egg from the nest and just happened to fall in the right spot. It's not as scary in writing and probably doesn't sound like much. My BF moved about 45 minutes away and would always pick me up from home every weekend. It's basically all freeway, going through the city we live in, and also passes right by the metro airport. This is a very long straight stretch of highway that is normally full of traffic. One night, around 1 AM I remember it being very deserted. We're driving right next to the airport runways and terminals, and all of a sudden there's a minivan nearby us. Of course we didn't even really acknowledge it. We're driving on the freeway. They probably just got on. And at some point, we both ended up looking out the passenger window at the exact same time. The minivan was lined up directly parallel to us, and there was a skinny looking, mid-50s man with his head angled directly towards us, with his eyes and mouth both wide open and the most insane and terrifying screaming type of expression I've ever seen. Like staring into our dang souls, and did not take his eyes off of us. I honestly couldn't even believe what I was seeing. I don't remember looking for that long, but I was so dang glad my BF saw the same thing as me because it was the most unsettling and confusing thing I've ever seen. The minivan got off immediately after, as far as I remember. I talked about it and how badly it freaked me out for the rest of the drive. Realistically, I know it's nothing that bad and he didn't do anything to try and harm us, but seriously, what the frick was that? Makes my heart beat fast just imagining his face. I didn't know a person's eyes could open that wide. It wasn't a spooky kind of creepy, but one time when I was 20, I was on a drive home and it was about an 8-hour trip. There ended up being a traffic accident on the way, so I got held up, but couldn't afford to book a hotel for the night. About 4 hours from home, like 11 PM, I was on a stretch of secluded highway and there was a car behind me, but I didn't think anything of it. The same car followed me for the next hour, but I assumed that they were just going to the same place. I ended up stopping at a gas station to grab an energy drink, and the car stopped across the road but didn't get out. Again, I didn't think anything of it. When I left, the car pulled out and followed me again. I kept driving and about an hour later pulled over at a rest stop to use the bathroom. The car, still behind me, stopped at the entrance of the rest stop, but didn't get out. At this point, I got super creeped out. I was like 2 hours from the next city home, so I didn't know what to do. Just to be sure I wasn't going crazy, I pulled over at the next pullout. The car pulled over on a pullout behind it, but on the other side of the road. Again, they didn't get out, but just sat there. So I kept driving, and as soon as I got back into my town, I called my parents to tell them what was going on. They told me to go downtown and make 4 left turns. I did, and again, the car followed me. My parents told me to drive to the police station. The car followed me the entire way to the police station, and as soon as I turned in, they peeled off like 50 km/h over the speed limit. I went in and told the cops what happened and they sent a patrol officer to find the guy, but I never heard anything about it. I have no clue what the person's motives were, but it terrified me. Now I'm super cautious anytime a car is behind me at night and takes the same turn I do. TLDR. A guy followed me for 4 hours straight and pulled over and watched me every time I pulled over. He ended up speeding away when I pulled into the police station. That is seriously creepy. I couldn't imagine the sheer paranoia arising from a situation like that. In college, friends and I had the bright idea to drive 6 hours to another school, leaving around 11 PM. I was completely sober and driving. Friends had been partying and were loud for the first hour, then dead asleep. Cruising through a construction zone around 4 AM, I started hallucinating and saw traffic barrels all over the road. It was confusing and unnerving, even though it only lasted 10-15 seconds. I pulled off at the next exit, parked behind a restaurant and slept till sunrise. Super weird and creepy, and thankfully hasn't happened since. I would have hallucinations when driving to college after pulling all-nighters. I had to drive through Amish country to get to school, so I would always hallucinate figures in black dresses and hats and sometimes black cats running across the road. Very irresponsible of young me. It's more dangerous to drive tired than drunk, at least according to Mythbusters. Driving with my wife, a cop car drove up very close behind us. It was weird because it was pitch black outside and he came out of nowhere. He drove around us, got about 100 feet ahead and disappeared. My wife and I were freaking out. We both watched it happen and were like, where the frick did he go? Wasn't in plain sight with his lights off. Got close enough to read your plates to make sure you were all good, then turned off his lights and went back into hiding again. I've had that happen before. My husband and kids were driving home late at night from an out-of-town trip. My husband passed a guy going too slow and pulled in front of him a little aggressively. He was tired. Anyway, the guy started tailgating us. We decided to exit early rather than drive home and allow the guy to see where we live. The guy followed. After taking several turns and not being able to lose the guy, my husband drove to his then workplace that had an armed guard on duty. The guy followed all the way to my husband's work and exited his car. My husband went up to the building to get the guard and the guy followed him. With the guard standing there, the guy chewed out my husband for passing him. The guard threatened to call the police if the guy didn't stay with him until we drove away so he couldn't follow us. This was probably 30 years ago, well before cell phones. I was driving on call to a situation at work and someone jumped off a bridge and committed suicide right in front of my car. 3 AM. Awful. I'm sorry you experienced that. It had to be awful. Was dating this woman who was afraid to drive or for some reason refused to, at least on the highway. I never knew why. I worked the late shift at the time. One day, I got home at some crazy hour somewhere between 3 AM and 5 AM. I had taken the following day off because her favorite band was playing in a city 2 hours drive away. She woke me up at 7ish am to wait in line. She had to be first, front and center. Guess who drove? I told her I was planning on getting some rest in the car while she held out spot in line. We got there, no line. Employees weren't even there yet. She's mad at me for trying to get rest in the car. I go sit with her on the curb. Hours go by, no one else in line. First employee walks by and offers us hot chocolate because it's February in the Midwest. People start lining up behind us in the late afternoon. I'm P. I could have slept before this ordeal. We attend the show. It was fun. Drive home and I ask her to drive. She refused. I drive us home. It was the scariest drive I've ever had. I was so tired and physically exhausted that I was hallucinating. I didn't know I was at first. The clouds on the horizon with the traffic in my eyes. It clicked with me when I was focused on one particular cloud and thought that's a big truck. Why can't I pass it after I realized my condition? I again tried to suggest she take over. Refused. I tried to take control over my mental state and focus. Got us home okay. Drove very cautiously and kept reminding myself of what I was seeing and what my brain was trying to make me think I was seeing. Got home. Passed out immediately, but had to work the following day and for the rest of the week. So I wasn't able to catch up on that lack of sleep for a while and that week was so draining. I resent her for putting me in that situation and it scares me to death. Afraid of having to go through that again. This was about 12 years ago and we broke up a while after that experience. I can see why you broke up with her. Driving I-80 late one night through central PA. It's slightly shorter to cut through Black Shannon than take Phillipsburg or Snowshoe, so we did that. It's a gravel road. I'm driving maybe 35 miles per hour when I see eye shine in the road, but like, in the road, low as could be. I couldn't see an animal, just blinking eye shine. Looking ahead, there's at least 5 more. Assuming it's not something I should run over, I creak up slowly on it and roll down my window. It's a freaking whippoorwill, rolling around happily giving itself a dust bath and singing. There must have been 15 more not giving a single crap about our car passing a few feet by. I was driving down an old country road at night when my headlights caught a glimpse of something. I slowed down and saw what appeared to be a decrepit looking person hunched over with a slow, ominous gait. They were just trudging along the side of the road in the middle of the night, like an aimless zombie. I pulled up beside them and hollered out. To my horror, I saw what appeared to be a middle-aged woman with stringy, greasy hair wearing some kind of gown. Not only was she barefoot, but her gown seemed to have bloodstains all over it. I hollered out again but she just kept walking. "Mom," I said, "are you alright? What are you doing?" She stopped dead in her tracks and slowly turned her head towards me. She gave me this awful, scary looking grin. Her teeth were disgusting. I immediately got a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew something wasn't right. Long story short, I called the police and followed alongside her in my vehicle. She didn't seem to mind me at all. She just kept walking. Eventually help arrived and it came to light that she was a resident at a nearby care facility. She had early onset dementia and apparently found her way out when no one was looking. Her period coincided with this event and she smeared the blood all over herself. This was years and years ago, but it's still fresh in my mind as a truly terrifying experience. I still have nightmares of seeing her limping along that dark highway, grinning maliciously. Dang. Early onset dementia before she even hit menopause. Must have been in her 40s or 50s maximum. That is really sad. Also, I would have crapped myself if I were in your shoes. Props to you for helping out. While driving to Powers Lake, North Dakota from Denver, in the middle of the night on lonesome roads, I encountered hundreds if not thousands of mule dead. A dump truck had flown past me and a few miles later I see him stopped on the side of road having hit a deer and turned it into mist. Blood mist. I drove for 5 or more hours up through Douglas, Wyoming and into Miles City, Montana. At points there were so many deer on the road I had to honk at them and drive 5 miles an hour in and out of the lanes to try to get around them. As the sun came over the horizon I could see hundreds of deer standing in the grass all around me. I've been up for quite a long time as it was a very long drive that got me to Denver, let alone taking a nap and heading off. I eventually found out that I had pretty much been traveling during the middle of the largest land mammal migration in the continental United States. We were visiting Big Sur and my kid got really sick, so at about 11 o'clock at night I jumped on the Pacific Coast Highway and headed to Carmel to pick up some medicine. There was very little traffic and it was very dark. Basically cliffs to the left of me going down to the ocean, and cliffs to the right going up to forests. It's a pretty curvy road at times, so all I could really do was focus on the road ahead and worry about my then 1-year-old child. About a half hour into the drive, a bright light suddenly showed up on my left. It started small, got bright really fast, and then just disappeared. At first I thought maybe it was a low-flying jet. The road was really curvy at this point so I couldn't get a good look. I remember trees on both sides of the road, although they were obviously thinner on the left side. But then, a couple of seconds later, another one came. There was an intense beam of light for a brief moment, and again, it disappeared. The road went around a corner, and whatever it was didn't follow me. I was still pretty shaken when I got to Carmel. I couldn't find a drugstore but did stumble across a grocery store that was open late, so I went in hoping to find Pedialyte. As I walked in, I noticed a map of the area on the wall, one of those touristy things that show local attractions. Just a bit south of Carmel it showed a lighthouse, west of the PCH. Needless to say, I was glad no one was in the car with me for the initial scare. It's been 15 years since this happened, and I still feel like quite the idiot to this day. This is my favorite story in this thread, lol. What a ride. It would happen to any of us. My sister was practicing driving around 9 PM or so at night. We stopped at the gas station before heading back home. Our windows were all the way down since it was summer. From the sidewalk, we heard a raspy voice call out to us. It was a middle-aged woman from the tone, but we couldn't see her. It was so dark out and there wasn't a street light by her. She kept asking us to drive her to her brother's house. She claimed she got off the bus too early and doesn't know where he lives. We ignored her but stupidly didn't close our window. We kept praying for these dang cars to stop coming down the street so we could turn. She kept asking for help and said she wasn't a sketchy person. We told her sorry and were finally able to turn. After we drove off, I was like, if we gave her a ride, how TF would she be able to tell us where her brother lives if she claims she doesn't even know to get there by foot? We stopped driving with the windows down afterwards. My husband and I were on an emergency trip out to Miss to help get my mom into a nursing home. I don't have a license to drive a car, so he had to drive the whole way. About 3 AM, we get to this stretch of road that is, as far as I could tell, a straight road with inlaid fields on both sides. All well and good, but in the pitch black, with no street lights, at 3 AM it was super unnerving. I noticed my husband, IDK, not acting quite right, like, he was breathing differently, and his posture was a little different. Little stuff but you notice when you're married. I was like, honey, do you need to take a break? And he goes, oh, no, I'm fine. Let's just finish this trip and we can find a hotel. I trusted his judgment and we made it across and hit the Hayata Days in somewhere. The next morning, we wake up and are brushing our teeth and I comment on how creepy that stretch of road was. He gets quiet and goes, I honestly thought I dreamt that. I remember it not feeling real and me feeling like it was a dream. I told him I'd asked him if he needed a break and he was like, yeah, I remember that too. And I thought I dreamt it. Do me a favor, and I'll return it if the need arises. If I ever tell you I'm fine and don't need a break after driving for 4 hours in pitch darkness again, don't take no for an answer. I was so out of it I didn't realize I was that gone. So we now have a standing agreement to stop each other well before then, but the idea that he was fully dissociated in that moment and had less than a healthy grasp on reality always makes me shiver. I hate to imagine all the moments that could have gone wrong. Remember, exhausted driving is just as bad as drunk driving. I was driving on the freeway, was not in a construction site or anything. I see what appeared to be a construction worker running across the freeway shining a light directly at my car, and then next thing I know he was gone. It was weird and creepy. Was driving home from my Sil's house after visiting my fiance for the weekend as she lived with her sister. I left early in the morning cause I had a 2-hour drive and work at about 8 o'clock. They live in a small town, so getting to the major highway is about a 20-minute drive itself through curvy roads and another small town. As I exited the second small town, about half a mile out, while it is still decently dark and foggy, I see a grown man in a full-on suit but walking on the side of the road. He was trying to hitch a ride, but everything in me told me to gun it. Gives me the heebie-jeebies as I have no idea who he was, where he was from, what he did, or where he went. I live in the middle of nowhere and I used to pick up hitchhikers constantly. On Christmas night I drove over the mountain back to my girlfriend's house after we spent the day with my family. She lived even further in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking an hour away from the nearest grocery store. I'm taking the only road off this area out of there. It's about 20 miles of nothing but woods a couple of miles deep on each side of this road. It's just a very rural area we all lived in. I'm 18 years old speeding along this long straight road about 80 miles per hour. Very dumb, but I was a reckless kid, just trying to get home before 2 AM. I suddenly fly past this guy in the dark just walking down the road miles away from everything. It was freezing out and I wanted to end Christmas doing something good and not let someone freeze to death on our mountain. I throw on the brakes and back up. I ask the guy if he needed a ride. He was carrying a compound bow. I was thinking a bow at 1:30 AM. Dude's a freaking poacher, but I can't back out now. I tell him to put it in the back of the truck and hope in. He sets his bow in the back and tells me he's parked up ahead a couple of miles. The guy gets in and goes dead quiet. I mean, he doesn't speak a word. As I said, I picked up strangers a lot back then but never had one of them just sit in silence. I ask him if he hung out with his family for Christmas today and he just mumbles no and immediately goes back into silence. At that point, I just wanted this guy out of my truck. I continue driving in silence for a couple of minutes until he tells me to pull over at the turnoff up ahead. I pull off to the side instead of pulling completely in. It's a dead end, just to be safe. He just kinda sits there silently for a couple of long uncomfortable seconds and then gets out. It really felt like he was thinking hard about what to do next. He finally gets out, leaving the door open. I say something on the lines of "Don't forget your bow," then I reached across to shut the door as he turns around to grab it. He slowly grabs his bow out of the back and then turns back and just stares at me through the window without moving. I just kinda sat there looking at him and decided to drive off. Not very eventful, but you had to be there. Something was up with this guy. He was giving off extremely weirdo vibes. At the pull-off I dropped him off at there was just a minivan parked with the door open. That struck me as odd too. I haven't picked up a hitchhiker since. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.